everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to DIA. Thank you for being here. My name is Jasmine Raymond. I'm DIA's curator. And together with Vincent Katz, we're organizing the relaunch of this series of reading in contemporary poetry. It's been a pleasure to have you all here, and this is our third program in the season, and we will have 3 more in the spring starting in February. Public programs here in the city with DIA are a special way in which we keep connected since the closing of the space in 22nd Street. Do you remember exhibition space closed in 2004? DIA has held a couple of satellite spaces, including these above our offices, and at the Hispanic Society of America, we have an exhibition space, and I encourage you all to please take a look at the exhibition that opened last month. It's Kujon A. Constellation Congress is an exhibition, a commission project from DIA, an exhibition in 3 spaces, the Hispanic Society, the Dan Flavin Art Institute in Bridgehampton, and an outdoor sculpture at DIA Beacon. I also remind you that our collection, DIA's collection, is on display at DIA Beacon, and I recently reinstalled 5 different galleries and also opened an exhibition of Franz Erhard Walter work. It's called Actions, Work as Action. And that's currently on view for another year. So if you have a chance in the winter season to go up there, please do, and let me know what you think. So tonight, I'll have Vincent do the introductions for tonight's speakers, poets, and just say briefly that it's been a true pleasure working with Vincent on this program, and we will continue it for a couple more years, we hope, right? I hope that he doesn't run away from me. And that it's a lovely collaboration, and I'm very happy that we're able to have it back on our programs. Thank you, Vincent.
Thank you. Thanks, Jasmine, and thank you all for coming. Yeah, this is the third reading in this revived series. The next reading will be on February 17th. We'll take a little break now and come back then with Ann Lauterbach and Paul Foster Johnson, and we hope you'll join us then and for other readings in the spring with John Ashbery and others, Paolo Javier, Brenda Ejima, and Michael Lally. So tonight's readers are Tim Peterson, a.k.a. Trace, and Charles Bernstein. Trace will go first. We'll have a short break after that, during which you can peruse the book table, have a beer, and then we'll come back with Charles Bernstein. And Tim asked me to try to avoid the pronoun he in this introduction, but I think I failed on that count. I tried with lots of gerunds, but it sounded a little stilted. Tim Peterson, a.k.a. Trace, was born in New Haven, Connecticut in 1978 and educated at Wesleyan University, graduating in 2000. He's currently a PhD student in English at CUNY Graduate Center. He worked at MIT Press, where he organized a series of discussions, the Analogous series, on collaborations between poetry and the visual arts. He's also worked for the publisher Routledge and as a graphic designer in the architectural field. His first book of poems, Since I Moved In, won the Gil Ott Award and was published by Chax Press in 2007. Peterson is also the author of the chapbooks Cumulus, Portable Press at Yo-Yo Labs 2004, and Trinkets Mashed into a Blender, Faux Press E 2005. He has a brand new chapbook, which I think is here. Is it here? Available? Just available, Violet Speech, which is just out from Second Avenue Poetry. He edits EOG, a journal of the arts, and curates a number of events in New York, including the Zinc Bar Poetry Series, the Tendencies Poetics and Practice Talks series on queer theory and the manifesto at CUNY Graduate Center, and, with Vincent Katz, the panel discussion series Quips and Cranks at the School of Visual Arts. Peterson is co-editing with Gregory Laynor the collected writings of Gil Ott, which is forthcoming from Chax Press in 2011. Much of Tim Peterson's poetry is written in prose. His sequence, Spontaneous Generation, begins, quote, "It starts with a flow under which wild plants grow in the current, the opposite of death. The flow could be conceived as the liberty of a prose form, not to have to end at a line break. But the breath and phrasing are particular, poetic. The wild plants might be the more isolated and striking phrases of poetry. The current is life, but also the flow of poetry or prose as it moves along, attempting to make music out of life's occurrences. But I may be getting ahead of myself, as Spontaneous Generation is the third section of Peterson's book since I moved in. The first section consists of poems, while the second, Sites of Likeness, is composed of mixed genre texts investigating the specific geography of Hartford, Connecticut. The first poem in the book, Trans Figures, contains a disembodied voice, quote, "It lusts after bodies of others, especially yours. It eyes you as you go to put the milk back in the fridge," quote. Found lines can sometimes be identified, as in the poem Thee and Thou that begins, quote, "An ocean tumbled by with a private boat," quote. However, the reader's recognition that some of the phraseology is environmental is less significant than his growing awareness of a precise and delicate rhetoric that is distinctly Peterson's own. There is sometimes a surrealist concatenation of images combined with rolling meters in long lines that recalls early New York school. Quote, "Tracheas commingle in the morning snow, and the sleds, enervated but still real, struggle down the hill." From the poem, Winter Finds a Ration to End Itself With. In Peterson's latest publication, Violet Speech, prose and poetry are mixed to cumulative effect, the poetry almost functioning as refrains for the prose, while the prose obfuscates as much as it clarifies. The Mark Rothko subject matter seems a smokescreen for another subject altogether. This publication marks a new step in the evolution of the poet Tim Peterson, who is also the performer and persona Trace. Please welcome Tim Peterson, AKA Trace, to DIA.
Hello. If you had told me, 5 or 6 years ago that I would be giving a reading with Charles Bernstein tonight, I would have said you're full of crap. How can that possibly be true? But this is an amazing event for me. It means a tremendous amount to me because Charles has been one of my favorite poets and critics for a long time, and he knows that. Now I'm getting up here and finding myself very inarticulate, but I just want to say that it's an honor and a pleasure to be reading with Charles tonight. And again, thank you to Vincent, and thank you to my friends who and my not yet friends who are here tonight, and even my enemies, who I don't think are here tonight, but maybe. Hemlock. Something's going haywire among the fens, nettles aping naturalness until they touch you, versus the pretty important password you imbibed. Dark liquid is a good idea. Scratch a late hour, you replicate yourself in our dark hair, attempted access. Growing out of dirt, like dirt, we archive, in a central location, the morning's blades. At last, our long grasses pose a security compromise, rights you relinquish to acquire a strained wisdom, like a post office anesthetized by foppery. Hot cheeks, the phishing emails. I'm sorry, you've been turned off. The inchworm crawling up that thing there in a dark time. A bunch of malarkey in the weeds wasn't music, was it? Crossed that line without friends as a scab amends, greased gladiolas, the swan tank full of weeds. Your ancient seed, we dug it like a house, looks out onto a lake paralyzed by adept seeing. It grows up around them throats. Oh, pungent carapace, oh, immersion in that home machine. Now I'm going to read some in-between poems. Sincere apologies for cross-dressing. I lived most of my life as a goth/glam lesbian vampire, and I think it has mainly to do with the objectification of sex in general. There's something very interesting about ficus trees, the solitary individual buoy in the midst of all the beauty. Wasn't the Shirley Temple hair precious? Apparently I have been attending algebra in vain for quite some time. My district is bound to go Democratic anyhow. I love that you loved the chipped nail polish, but mostly it just made me really tired. Like David Lynch, like cross-dissing. There's something very interesting about people who find themselves stranded in difficult she-mall, tranny-surprised, transvestite situations. They need relationships like that. Oh, yes. I guess I am what you could call it Victorian goth, also known as a true goth, the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, occasionally suck each other's minor wounds. I feel kinda weird saying you're hot, a close encounter of the hippie kind. It was a big old lashing of fuck me's, the elemental and emotional Jamie Lee Curtis examples I gave. They're examples of how, often when a ficus drops all its leaves, that means that there's an undetected gas leak. There is the disconcerting Lynchality of arriving home to find it unfamiliar, years of experience as everyone's automatism, fantasy, trash can. You, personally, don't like labels. Wig cap. Wig cap. Last week I was at the bookstore picking up Spinoza and Whitehead. That's an example of metonymy. Spinoza and Whitehead wanted to go for, this is the great crowd. Wow, geez, who would ever get that, ever? Spinoza and Whitehead wanted to go for a drink afterward, but I said we should be getting home soon. I only have 5 hours before I turn into a pumpkin. I handed the books over to the woman at the counter to pay for them, and I said, it was a relief to find these. They are exactly what I needed. She said, so, where do you teach? Pumpkins are more frequent in the window displays. You and I form a figure in which the area of likeness and the area of unlikeness becomes thinner than a wig cap. Sometime around then, I had a horrifying dream in which I was swallowing large rats while trying not to kill them. I felt secure in the knowledge that my courageously humane rat swallowing would not go unnoticed. A wig cap protects you from another's scalp disease. I carved a bust of Spinoza on my pumpkin, and the costumed kids passed by the porch like an ostrich. Friends had been calling. I cooked dinner that night in the last clean pot. Hydro-powered turbines. We spend all afternoon reading impenetrable texts like mystical objects, and when we look up, the sun is ailing. It has been given too much meaning, and it burns through us, so lazy and retrofitted with memory. To be open when we wish to survey and to be surveyed, that is the best case scenario. A best case scenario is a tactical move, analyzing the situation for its strengths and weaknesses. A stream of consciousness winds its way through the valley of selves below in the street sprung with gardens at the edges. Hydropowered turbines start up, initiated by a single mouse click, a roving self-formation. To humanize it, we encounter a sprig of rhythm jutting out of the wall we thought solid, undermining it. We implies a tour through lands of delight as well as suffering and a distance from that morning. From the bird's eye view out the roving window, a study of gray and faded tones. An absolute grid or relative grids are suggested but not definite, as we can step away from the shutters on our route to the kitchen for a cup of tea with purple antioxidants. Carving the notice onto a playful scrim, a trade-off, and then erasing it, we rebound from intimacy into a bone enclosure. That's at the Google headquarters. They power the generators with water turbines. That's yeah. I know. Yeah. Can I get a drink of water from someone? Okay, now I'm going to read Violet's speech. And I want to give a special thanks to Charles Alexander, Charles Borkus, Philip Marinovich, and Andrew Levi, as well as Wayne Kestenbaum and his partner Steve for being early and responsive readers of this manuscript. Violet's speech. The violets in the mixed perennial border, plump, with lacy edges, come in a variety of purples. The violets providing orally answered, please rise, please stand. The undertenant of said premises, stem to petiole to leaf, voiced several stipulations drooping after rain, sweet Craollo vortex stain. A cross-examination. How do you answer the stigma-style petal ovary? I speak an unlisted option, stigma anther. An argument ensues, and I'm insisting, now shouting, at the clerk behind the desk. Like a buzzing bee, he gathers drones, hard-ons. I am his receptacle, discretion. Perennial violets spread by creeping roots and rhizomes, duly sworn before a plaque that reads, "In God we trust." The entire garden bed a court, a caption for that plaque we saw behind the violet's head, low-slung ceilings miracle grow, cheap name tag font cotyledons. Take notice, the court has decided. Violet speech is harmful. Violet speech cannot be legislated. The violet we'd want eluded its propositioner's desires. This field too dark fuchsia, this malevolent light purple body too foregoing to surrender up sun rays. Armies recline on armoires, illuminated by the occasional flash of violet color. Gray, resentful faces walk among violets marred by an amendment by the claimant. Words hammered at the dais around which violets gathered, clamoring for restrictions on our need to legislate. The fact that we were violets were conscious of what was said about us, how we avoided becoming a plot that could be quantified, surrounded, dug up. Stigma, style, petal, ovary, how we approach the bench bed. Violets, caption, hammered armies. Font, cotyledons, flash, please rise. We avoided, marred, gathers drones. Self-pollinated, donning a knot. A meadow discontinuance open. Need this threatened, bracteoles, donning a swarming. The dirt is swarming with small, flowered, hybrid lawyers. A violet donning a suit, suit donning a violet. I pray for a meadow discontinuance up close. Instead, I get an untitled Rothko judgment, dismissal without prejudice. A line composed of complementary colors divides the bracteoles of the canvas in the proportions of a figure with vibrating edges. A human figure, not a violet, self-pollinated and pointing downward, thinks thickets. The entire garden bed a court, the family ranging from nut-like seeds spread by ants stalking the sheets, but violets are not as powerful as passive resistance. Outside, I breathe in the purple air. A woman observes my violet suit, stops and asks if I'm here for the beer tasting meetup. After blooming, we visit the Metropolitan Museum and pay the minimum endosperm fee. After blooming, we produce capsules that when they open, grow into poems. Rothko dismissal ranging passive, violet day publicly blooming, breathe in the endosperm. Receptacle asks when they open, grow, among instead, sponsor higher power. I pray red square backing, modeling, Rothko boxes dead heads, liminal early lagging, fade listening, dilapidated amendment, array. But back to what I was saying about Rothko's paintings. Rothko sits through the entire self-help session listening to everyone talk. Then when he opens his mouth, about 5 people, all violets, get up and leave. Rothko is extremely upset, purple, blue, yellow, and so am I. It makes him feel his paintings aren't worth listening to. They barely are, barely there. Confronted instead by the human form already segmented like a coffin, cut to abstract proportions of a dead head. Most painters lose their attraction as they fade, although some argue that dead heading can increase performance. I'd complain about this simplification to the dark red square taking up the bottom corner as if it could remember former blooms. If the box's shtick gets old and the rules underlying them change, like natural selection, would hurt adapt with the ability to be art? Rothko attempts to answer me here using terms like sponsor and higher power, but his liminal early canvases speak otherwise. I am lagging behind the group now, looking them over. Is Rothko a petitioner, a respondent, or a lawyer? Am I Rothko? Repetition isn't inevitable. The demon who suddenly appears to you in the poem and says, "You are doomed to always write about violets." Instead, you can make an atmospheric scene of a subway like Rothko did, with a dour glowing color combination that creates depth within a shallow space, reaching around like a body that belies available discourse. I notice something flash outside on the street, something violet. I try to take a photo out the window. Argue segmented Rothko, embodied life, dour phrase factory, coffin respondent of violet, spring impinges, self-help tragic, lagging poem belies you'd point, strategic layout, running water, canvases otherwise petitioner, barely a shallow. At this stage, total estimate for poem construction is $9,800 plus tax. Installation of the Rothko paintings may cost extra due to shipping-related precautions. Importation of specific breeds of violets adds possible embodied energy, with additional costs anticipated for continued maintenance as spring impinges on us, opening the poem like a bloom that only appears fictitious. In order to proceed, we need to have 30% of the allegory provided up front. We look forward to working with you and helping you take your poem to the next level, loosening up that frame which could have doomed you to a tragic metaphor, Orpheus, Electra, Pandora, et al. Once the initial design phase has been completed, installation of poem on stainless steel or concrete requires an additional 2 months, but installation on wind and running water is negligible. Strategic alternation of metaphors of artistic genius and altruistic service allow us to speak through you, actually providing impetus for the poems, but not, you'd argue, making the real design decisions. Have you been subordinated to the engineering process at this point, your you being written like an accident? Are you a factory poet? As long as you contribute an appropriately large deposit up front, we won't need to answer that question. Sincerely, War of the Worlds Design Systems. Contribute to unhappiness up due to lack, shipping related, 14 blocks of tragic you're you, lace-topped challenge accident. We need continued Rothko terminals made of saliva, lack fibers, working for antennae to proceed, open plan spring and nest, appears rearing prefer, hunched dreamily. I have to get a drink for a second. How am I doing on time? So, appears rearing prefer, hunched dreamily. It's a challenge working for the WASPs, hunched secretly among them at endless computer terminals made of paper fibers collected from dry wood, bark, and saliva, Googling away. Or do they work for me and my shifting boundaries? The wasps rely on a nest from which we conduct many activities. Rearing young, installing 14 blocks of new housing, accentuating the open plan layout of very low lace-topped necks. When they order me to get on top of things in wasp language, communicated by saliva collusion, antennae collision, I need to remind myself these males lack a stinger. A reluctant wasp, I prefer instead to stare out the L-shaped sky patios dreamily on a softly padded, observe orientation, take advantage of the sun, how they stage thrills and overlapping of program and landscape elements, various periods of extreme tight lacing. I accumulate this and other strings of words for the wasps as a means of translating their desires. Maybe they won't notice the violet streaks. Cutting our teeth on competition wins, highly varied commissions, and the life juices of potent younger firms, we typically build our umbrella-shaped nests under eaves and ledges. But wasp waist laces stick tightly drawn in a bait. Distrust my fag brain description of the hives we slenderly experience, buttoned up to promote biodiversity. Altruistic service of saliva, slenderly fag-brained competition, other insect hardened by hole, landscape patron morally smug, wing cutaway sort of day, I could remove private roofs, cyberspace tendons, fuck face, punctured in a lower loss, breathed openly integrated, slenderly than mere away. Take notice. If you fail to answer or appear, the wasps won't reveal the secrets of our real parasitic or predaceous activities, which play a vital role in limiting the populations of other insect species. Yet sometimes I see a few of them through a crack in the combs, laying their eggs inside a client or vendor. Take notice. When the client appears puffed up brown and hardened by typological research, the adult parasitic wasps chew a round hole in the abdomen to emerge. When I see this behavior, it still turns my stomach. And I almost want to put down the caterpillar, the throat of which I'm currently sucking the juice from. The wasps, like Rothko, are nice modernists. Nice. Actually, now that I've goofed, I should probably say I want to give a big thank you also to my publisher, Paulo Javier, who very kindly published this book. So thank you, Paulo. Nothing to do with what I just read, but nice laying, vital, play client, focus ornamenting a draft, volatile turns my brain, my spine, caterpillar team, green rug, portico chagrin appears client, almost want the wasp pathos, design team hardened, adult still, zooming back to reveal. Identity is so messy, like an essay. Can this escape from legislation be legislated? I'm starting to distrust myself as a client, I thought, so I'll get on top of things. I'll try to see how many components I can remove, uncover the essence. First, the wasp waste goes into the dumpster, then the wasp pathos, then the contours of my face, rudimentary projecting cornice. My left arm at the spot where it enters the torso, see longitudinal section, is detached for recycling and reuse in someone's trussed timber roof. I'm almost bare, a morally smug green rug, almost there. But when I discover I've thrown half my brain into cyberspace, I stage a protest against my design team, pensive violets ornamenting my loss. In effect, I'm dead-heading my own chagrin. The arch of my spine, already punctuated in a lower quadrant, falls into the next stanza on a grand scale, see cutaway elevation. A monster I breathe openly without lungs, more integrated into the landscape than before, allowing for a sense of community that also includes spaces for private reflection. Like an open plan office pitched to the unsuspecting wasp, I predict production porticos. Yet in private moments, of which there are now none, I keep zooming focus back to the bed of violets, poring over their legal briefs in long, slow drafts that provoke the essence of volatile lived norms. For example, some violets have a special shaped flower petal that resembles a wasp wing. But to draw this comparison would be like installing plants as one of your parents. The leaves, it's true, looked like a bustle from an old-fashioned dress. Equipment monster openly, quadrant fell an Orpheus day, application of stone to loss, chagrin my spine, old-fashioned, without they them a smug sea, try to look heart-shaped bustle beetle, punctured of reflection, my left. The petitioner prays for a final judgment of eviction, awarding to the petitioner possession of premises described as follows. Bed of violets, writing subject, wasp nest, Rothko. Political opinions, writer's body, vision, reader, fingernails, purse. Who is the petitioner, the middle manager? This cutaway section of the violet shows all the equipment you need to identify as kidney-shaped, heart-shaped, or actively growing. This anther, it's true, contains a pollen cross-section which allows internal drainage. The application of stone to the blossom, rather than mere cladding, creates an Orpheus sort of day in which remembered surface constitutes functionality. Well, okay, so I'm stuck with a plaque that reads, "In God We Trust," written in 10 ugly fonts on the back wall. It doesn't move me at all. Now approach the bench, a hunch, a group of wasps and the violets that try to look like them, or maybe they're violets and the wasps who try to be their them. Try to look. Who is writing this? Fuck. Suddenly a wasp, a violet, lands on the Rothko painting and tries to suck it dry. Thank you.
It's an honor and also a challenge to introduce Charles Bernstein. I once heard an introduction to a reading of Charles Bernstein in which the person merely listed the publications and achievements of Charles Bernstein, and it took about 15 minutes, after which we had a lot of data, but really he hadn't told us anything of his own opinion about Charles Bernstein's work. So I thought I could give actually a description of that introduction, and that would be a meta introduction. But then I thought, nah. So this will be a somewhat edited version of Charles Bernstein's achievements. But I think in exchange, there'll be maybe a little bit something of what I think of Charles Bernstein's poetry. It is a pleasure to welcome Charles Bernstein back to DIA. He first read at DIA in December of 1997. Charles Bernstein was born in New York City in 1950. He attended the Bronx High School of Science and Harvard University, from which he graduated in 1972 with a BA in philosophy. His undergraduate dissertation was called Three Steins. It was about linguistic reference and the poetics of the ordinary in Ludwig Wittgenstein and Gertrude Stein. The third Stein was Bernstein. After 2 years in Santa Barbara in the mid-1970s, he moved back to New York, where he has been based ever since. In the mid-1970s, Bernstein and Ted Greenwald started the Ear In poetry reading series, which often brought together language poets and New York school poets on the same bill. From 1978 to 1981, Bruce Andrews and Bernstein published the groundbreaking periodical Language. In 1990, Bernstein was appointed to the David Gray Chair at SUNY Buffalo and was later named SUNY Distinguished Professor. In 2003, he moved to the University of Pennsylvania, where he was appointed Donald T. Reagan Professor of English and Comparative Literature. At Penn, with Al Phil Rice, he co-founded Penn Sound, a web-based audio and video archive of poets reading their work. In 2006, Bernstein was elected a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. It's hard to avoid some of the litany, I have to say. He's the author of 40 books, ranging from chapbooks to large-scale collections of poetry and essays, libretti, translations, and collaborations, several with his wife, painter Susan B. Recent books of poems include All the Whiskey in Heaven Selected Poems, Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, 2010, Girly Man, University of Chicago Press, 2006, With Strings, Chicago, 2001, and Republics of Reality, Sun and Moon Press, 2000. He's published 2 books of essays, A Poetics, Harvard University Press, 1992, and Contents Dream, Sun and Moon Press, 1986, reprinted by Northwestern in 2001. And 1 essay/poem collection, My Way, Speeches and Poems, University of Chicago, 1999. In spring 2011, University of Chicago Press will publish Bernstein's The Attack of the Difficult Poems, Essays and Inventions. Charles Bernstein's poetry is the perfect soundtrack for many people's lifelong desire not to be normal. In particular, it is the perfect soundtrack for a generation of people who came of age in the 1970s. Whereas some may take Bernstein's poetic corpus as a celebration of diversity, a clarion call for the right to be unfettered in terms of style and genre, I would argue almost the opposite. The wonderful stylistic movement from body of work to body of work reveals a consistent voice, and that voice, while it can be playful and is often hilarious, is uniform in its reaction to whatever can be considered a norm of poetry or writing in general. Poetry and prose in Bernstein's work are famously interwoven. In his essay, State of the Art, Bernstein writes, quote, "What interests me is a poetry and a poetics that do not edit out so much as edit in, that include multiple conflicting perspectives and types of languages and styles in the same poetic work or the same collection of essays." And when he adds that he hopes readers will be tempted to read his critical prose as poetry, there is a very real sense in which that is possible. Yet, in his selected poems, All the Whiskey in Heaven, published this year, one is struck by the roundness of Bernstein's tone, so that while particular words sometimes seem chosen at random, the music is identifiable. The voice that goes from disparate words strung across a page to something familiar and almost prosaic is above all musical. And the familiarity, while sometimes appropriated, or seemingly appropriated, often reminds us of the ways our own minds work, as in the poem, As If the Trees by Their Very Roots Had Hold of Us, published in 1979, which begins, quote, "Strange to remember a visit really not so long ago, which now seems finally past. First you anticipate a thing and it seems far off. The distance has a weight you can feel hanging on you, and then it's there, that point, whatever, which now, while it's happening, seems to be constantly slipping away until you can only look back on it, and yet you're still there. There's something poignant, elegiac, and I would stress non-ironic about these phrases. More common in Bernstein's early poetry is a willful, one wants to say joyful, placing of words in unexpected arrangements. One notices the constant shifting of where the breaks occur, by the paragraph or stanza, by the sentence, by the phrase, by the word, by the letter. There is something comprehensive in this approach, a well-tempered poetics. While often harshly disjunctive, an appropriate trope for those who do not fit in, Bernstein's poetry can also bend classical rhetoric into newly effective streams. Quote, "Time wounds all heals, spills through with echoes neither idea nor layer can jam," from the poem You. In his appropriated texts, Bernstein reveals an equally controlled manipulation of both language and tone, allowing irony to loom large but not to capsize his vessel, as in this work composed of descriptions of television programs. Quote, "A retarded young man witnesses a murder but is not articulate enough to tell his story to the police. Bachelors are all agape over a new girl in town. A mental patient returns home to a cold mother and a domineering husband," etc. More recently, Bernstein has investigated metapoems, poems that only describe themselves or their possible legal contingencies. He's turned to rhyming quatrains, composing poems that appropriate an almost sing-song cadence in situations of familial intimacy. Bernstein has also written powerful political poems, such as War Stories and the Ballad of the Girly Man, the latter dedicated to his son Felix. I have seen and heard Bernstein read several times, and each time it has been entirely different. Like an actor, a method poet, let's call him, he is able to be subsumed into the character a poem requires. In a reading of Jack Kerouac's Mexico City Blues, amid a cast of stellar readers, Bernstein stood out as the only one who actually sounded like a junkie. Tonight's reading is sure to be just as memorable. Please join me in welcoming Charles Bernstein back to DIA.
Thank you so much, Vincent. What a terrific introduction and commentary. And it's great to be reading at DIA and great to read with Tim Peterson, whose work, Trace Tim, whose work I have so long admired. And my pleasure to read with you, Tim. This is my epigraph for tonight. It sort of speaks to the method poetry. This is my method. It's after the very famous poem of Fernando Pessoa from 1931, Autopsychographia. Poets are fakers whose faking is so real they even fake the pain they truly feel. And for those of us so well read, those red pains feel, oh, so swell. Not the poet's double header, but the knot of the neither. And so the wheels go whack, ensnaring our logical part in the train wreck called the human heart. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Poem Loading. Poem Loading. Please wait. This next work, the title is sort of my motto as a writer of verse. Unready, unwilling, unable. Peerlessly literal, We're a little nearer than we were. There is nothing I would rather see than an angel dancing on a rhyme or a unicorn playing Phaedra. I love humanity. It's people I can't bear. I am a Jewish man trapped in the body of a Jewish man. I love people. Humanity scares me. If nothing is translatable, then everything is. Scars me. Sob rule. Boss is serrated. Slush life. The slope of the sloop is spooked. The revolutionary spectacle of a baby tearing off her diaper or a crippled young boy casting aside his crutches cannot help to move all those who yearn for liberation, a liberation that is blocked by the cruel forces of fate and biological inequality. Poetry doesn't exist to be understood or to solicit accolades or dismissals. It does what it does, what it can do. When it comes, it comes. When it goes, it goes. This is the secret of rhythm. For what leaves one person high and dry is for another as necessary as water. And can you have that necessity for one without at the same time sacrificing the availability to another? And those 2 points of accessibility, inaccessibility may also occur for the same person at different times or different parts of any one of us, odd as that may sound. Poetry's power, some poetry's power, may be that its appeal is not universal but specific, not popular but partisan. We don't all agree. If everything is translatable, nothing is. Then I came to a fork in the road. Mediocre politicians campaign in poetry and govern in prose. Great politicians campaign in prose and govern in poetry. Camp is a drag. Sometimes at night, when I can't sleep, I take down one of the volumes of my vast Yellow Pages collection. Too much light, so I go to draperies, shutters, and blinds. But which one? Draperies, shutters, or blinds? I write to forget or just not think about it too much. There ain't nothing like a metaphor, nothing in this world. There ain't nothing you can name that is anything like a metaphor. Hold it. I got to take this call. It might be from someone more important than you. I don't even know you. Infinite joy in finite time, finite pain in infinite time. My little blurb must think it queer to stop without a poem book near. But I have proverbs still to write to shore me against the frightening night. Grenier, green in green shines. Nowhere, now here, nowhere. Time's loopy as a pretzel, salty as belly locks. A gift horse looks nobody in the mouth. The more one turns away from a thing, the greater the force with which it returns in the unconscious. Tea Party. I love America so much, I want to lock her in my basement to have her all to myself. We've come to take your country back. Our America, not yours. Oars, pours, lures, oars. Nothing is done forever, or everything is done forever. Poetry often operates in the spaces between intention and serendipity, or it reframes, displaces, replaces where the intentionality lies. But how readers interpret the result of randomization is not random. We project meaning, associate freely, symbolize the process structure. Who decides what poetry ought to be? Historically, poetry's history suggests many radical swerves from such oughts, and of course, much compliance as well. What some reject as empty, others embrace as visceral. And what some embrace as rational, sensible poetry, others reject as empty, lifeless. Poetry is not about what it says, but what it does. For where one finds commensurability with paraphrase, there the sheets have not been rumpled. There poetry has not, so to speak, spent the night. Mandelstam. So in the end, what it comes down to is, can truth handle truth? Wake up and smell the plasticine. Two stones with one bird. Redemption comes and redemption goes, but transience is here forever. Armed stasis. I will make a fact with you, Robert Frost. Me on the one side, you on the one side. No learned astrologer will ever separate us, crouching in the proverbial darkness, even when it sounds like light. Gosh, I gotta go soon. Even now, the Jersey Shore beckons. My cabana for your cheddar. My bootstraps for your boot. The moment is you. You know you're old when the people who look old to you are younger than you are. You know you're old when the crankcase works better than the crank. You know you're old when the nights are longer and the sleep shorter. You know you're old when tarpaulin covers the boilerplate. You know you're old when screams are seen but not heard. You know you're old when the gray sky holds promise. You know you're old when silken erasures haunt the morning light. You know you're old when dust settles on dust. You know you're old when laughter mocks its own reprise. You know you're old when loss precedes purpose. You know you're old when lilacs languish in lard. You know you're old when maybe means never. You know you're old when tessellation embroiders larceny. You know you're old when the blue is greener and the dew evaporated. You know you're old when the old battles seem inevitable. You know you're old when the next step is harsher than the last. You know you're old when the wail of regret cripples the harp of inscrutability. You know you're old when the avalanche of inconsequence evaporates in the fields of empty promise. You know you're old when all that is faded rises up before your eyes like steam from a manhole. You know you're old when each hour awaits and days are fugitive. You know you're old when manners replace methods. You know you're old when dreams remind you of summer reruns. You know you're old when time past becomes the days ahead. You know you're old when you think that the handprints of Pesh, Merrill, and Lascaux were made by your children. You know you're old when you feel you need to highlight your hair with gray so you will look more distinguished. You know you're old when you can read these words. You know you're old when your knowledge separates itself from your experience. You know you're old when the tyranny of the present obscures the masquerade. You know you're old when indelible marks melt like icicles. You know you're old when everything new seems retrofitted and established monuments hang like discarded shoes on an electrical wire. You know you're old when the moments are precious but the hours leaden. You know you're old when innocence is shrouded in experience. You know you're old when you can see yourself in the mirror, but yourself cannot see you. You know you're old when the long-time haunts seem changed for the worse. You know you're old when light is useless against the dark and winter refuses to cede its hold. You know you're old when time served is a life sentence. You know you're old when even the limelight is dim. You know you're old when limits define you. You know you're old when sentiment is ambient and ambience intoxicates. You know you're old when memento obscures masquerade. You know you're old when the bright light of history blinds you. You know you're old when your accomplishments are like the morning dew. You know you're old when you see sun and thank shadows. Fold. I pet my pet. I fear my fear. I torment my torment. I wear my wear. I tear my tear. I comb my comb. I brush my brush. I hush my hush. I quiet my quiet. I touch my touch. I hate my hate. I love my love. I taste my taste. I slap my slap. I rip my rip. I rope my rope. I chain my chain. I son my son. I name my name. I surprise my surprise. I slur my slur. I laugh my laugh. I cry my cry. I hope my hope. I shout my shout. I sand my sand. I deal my deal. I share my share. I snare my snare. I aim my aim. I lack my lack. I face my face. I blame my blame. I trap my trap. I curb my curve. I need my need. I desire my desire. I cloak my cloak. I approach my approach. I reproach my reproach. I delay my delay. I hurt my hurt. I pain my pain. I word my word. I shock my shock. I risk my risk. I language my language. I act my act. I ache my ache. I stoke my stoke. I stash my stash. I turn my turn. I waste my waste. I fold my fold. I tether my tether. I weather my weather. I store my store. I eye my eye. I tongue my tongue. I finger my finger. I figure my figure. I sin my sin. I light my light. I shell my shell. I stone my stone. I void my void. I break my break. I gulp my gulp. I shit my shit. I time my time. I temper my temper. I anger my anger. I taint my taint. I will my will. I fund my fund. I ply my ply. the internet and email has offered me so many new friends in my my mail that I was so fascinated by the form of the letters from my new acquaintances that I thought I would write my own to send out to all of you. Dear presenter, for circum in percent, I saw present your presenter picture on where sure presenter one and one tilde aunt two talk circum or me point very circum t soon point un. I am old ma percent 57-year $. Ba percent tooth and smap may punk ver e her punt me percent people. I come ride dollar iter ride dollar it po percent re percent e and come to email right ink greater than so sell slash good semi stocks ver semi re chi circum and Prozac circum see since I al $ also can tilde sleep bing bing business opportunity to tell circumly own tilde my fur semins. If you semi who have some come at money to help me slash I expect percent prostrate percent 8 percent sir any comma e de semi e ni dot comma d mon circum e I'll point so broad in trub dot bull will send you $ you my p circum sure knee point check fur circum erst at poet who semi like lex you all percent ready slash $ e and mail me $ at swift a at sorrow.tv how your friend and soul may point e bing oh. This short work is called An Enigma Was His Name. Oh. Gather ye rosebuds while you can. Old times are locked in an armored van. Stories told, hope shot. Chill out for the ultimate knot. This is called Poems for Rehab. Hang in, turn up a tune. Silence is unnerving. God hurts those hurt themselves. Vengeance is mine, saith the ideological state apparatus. Just give me one more choice. Be here then, be then there, be there now. Hope is the thing feathered with loss. There once was a young woman of Whitechapel who forgot that Eve ate an apple. She went looking for heaven, but found only a haven. So they buried that young woman of Whitechapel. The introvert after Wordsworth. Suddenly those fears, your first and ever dreaded foe, suddenly you turn from some imbecile prose that rails and ricochets against chimeric life with dictums ripped from surface, scars by wanton brains and moral poise, thoroughly ill fit to Orphic lyre, and with your beauteous breath you slowly refuse refuge, jolting yourself with jeers that anxious years will bring an empty heart and blinded thought. Time served. Honor her voice in me, where want knows neither hope nor deceit, flown as if bent in place or smacked into temporary adjust filter after total system flush, revamped by best in view anchorage, just salty enough goes on where the instigations to instantiation are plumb zero, bearish on fate, bullfrog of a guy, no spills. Argument ages past warrant, funhouse carbonization, folded into lore. Honor her voice in me, and still a searing can be seen. Under adequate convocation, the apparatus collapses on cue, far more than would be impingement. I grieve in tow, untie by stalling, as honor lives by two. Habits accent by holding steady, a lifeboat to nearly everything. Bridges buckle, weathered to their climate. I feel as if the day's done gone and left me in this lone and fearsome blind. This somewhat longer work is called Recalculating. It's the title of the manuscript I'm reading from, Recalculating. You can't be part of the problem if you don't see how you're part of the solution. For a poem is not the poetic faculty, but the means of exciting it in mankind, Poe. Information wants to be free from personification, as if all we are and do revolves around a hollow center. Every poem is a model of a possible world that only comes into being when reading is activated. The poem is a constant transformation of itself, as in the poem plays you or you play the poem. Aces or witches, clubs beat the rhythm. Spades are queens and kings rule. We didn't have it when we needed it, but got it once we didn't. Postmodernism, modernism with a deep sense of guilt. Language is an albatross, a sullen cross, a site of loss. I think of Emma climbing the icy rocks of our imagined world and taking a fatal misstep, one that in the past she could have easily managed, then tumbling. In my mind, she is yet still in free fall, but I know all too well that she hit the ground hard. The hardest thing is not to look back, the endless if-onlys, the uninvited what could have beens. I live not for foreknowledge. I live not with foreknowledge, but consequences, wishing I had foreknowledge. Suffering the consequences of not. How poems become sites for mourning, not in fixed ritual repetitions, prescribed liturgy, but as mobile and specific areas for reflection and projection, holding areas, havens. Not words received for comfort, but works actively discovered in the course of searching. Not to get over as a disease, but a way of living with as a condition. The nightmare reality that erupts in the daylight like burnt offerings at a pizza parlor. You say skeleton, I say, can you say that again? That's no phallus. That's the election of my impotence, writ large, as in, me transformo, you pale face. Me transformo, you the unexpected product of a sudden revelation. I love art so much, but it never returns the favor. Poems are stuck in black and white, which means that every color connected to a poem is proof of the inner life of words. As surely as God invents the idea of God, but also godlessness. Angels brush against spattered brushwork. Gory purple eyes loom out amidst hearts pierced by arrows. Every misfigured thought, a dialect of its moment. Say, don't you speak in a dialect too? Sometimes I am disturbed even by ability to function. I feel at times a shell of myself, a shell of myself. Every day I know less than the day before. People say that you learn something from such experiences. But I don't want that knowledge, and for me there are no fruits to these experiences, only ashes. I can't and don't want to heal, perhaps though go on in the full force of my disabilities, coexisting with a brokenness that cannot be accommodated. In the dark. Right after Emma died, I could not stand to look at the photos of her. And there are lots because she made so many self-portraits. I felt each photo was a lie, flaunting her presence in the face of her being no more. Now I see the photographs are what she left me, that she is present to me in the way these haunted and haunting works are present. Poetry should be silent, unread, invisible, inconceivable. The true poem can never be written or heard. No idea but the idea of ideas. Not questions but the inadequacies of answers. Not currency but against the tide. Better a weak jaw than an iron fist. Stalling is my inspiration. It's what I'd like to undo that keeps me up at night. The problem with teaching poetry is perhaps the reverse of that in other fields. Students come to it thinking it's personal and relevant, but I try to get them to see it as formal, structural, historical, collaborative, and ideological. What a downer. Orphaned by the world with no home but there. If you don't make a mistake thrice, how do you learn from it? If X is Y, then Y is Y, and O, O. So much of what we can't imagine we are forced to experience, and even then we can't imagine it. I got a chiasmus as big as all Detroit, and as old as the 2nd Avenue L. He had the honeyed lips of someone who'd been in poetry too long, whose idealism had years ago become a manner of speech, and whose only aesthetic aspirations were for a revival of the ideas he had rejected in his youth, as if you could get a second bite off of the apple of the new and not come out smelling like a candied turkey in a slow dance medley. It was a fork in the road, but he had always favored spoons. And now, facing the music to which he had never dared to listen, he dove into the waters he has always reviled, ready to be eaten alive by the sharks of his proudly arrogant misjudgments. This is the difference between a sentence and paradise. A sentence comes to an end. Paradise has no beginning. China export, not made in China t-shirts. U.S. export, not made in America t-shirts. It was the kind of day you read about in the movies. What's unseen but said as consequent as what's apparent but unspoken. Words perform for inner eye, we o'erlook at pleasure's peril. Listening for inaudible songs in a sonic sea, I lost my bearings, falling uncaring into traps of my own despairing. Always treat advice with skepticism, especially this advice. Freedom from ideologies, designer genes. Ideologies' veils are imaginary. The freedom from these veils, delusional. Universalism is moral, particularism ethical. But every apple has a core, every horizon a philosophic song. We are gathered at a site of dialogue. As chaotic as our discussion may sometimes seem, we are always making patterns with it. Most of those patterns are lost in the dark matter of the mystic writing pad. When I say we, I don't mean everyone or perhaps anyone else, just a sense of some collectivity beyond myself. We aced the shit out of that asshole. My advice to young poets is always start your own magazine or press and publish your own work and those of your contemporaries whose poems seem most crucial for the art as you perceive it. And respond as much as possible through poetics and reviews to this work. Articulate its values, value its articulation. The web certainly makes such publishing easier, but it does not solve the hardest part, finding a community of other poets that allows for active and intense exchange, not based just on location or prior friendship or like-mindedness, but on the qualities and quiddities of the work as it unfolds in time and space on earth, as in the heavens of our image nations. Our inalienable rights are inevitably alienated. In this way, capitalism seems to merge with destiny, or our fate through a darkened glass is projected onto the world of which we are sentient. So then it's necessary to be reminded from time to time that hegemony is something to work for rather than only and ever to recoil against. I've grown so accustomed to the dark, I can hardly imagine anything more than shadows. The Jew is a textual construction. You're not there even when you're there. You're not gone even when you've went. You're still near even when you're gone. In poetics, nothing is new except the exaggerations. Beauty lies, I have always thought, a wonderful deception while it lasts. Elliptical poetry, language poetry's bark without its bite. The absence of ornament is an ornament. Here's the message. There is no message. I'm talking to you, motherfucker! You want a message? Go to a massage parlor. I hope I have your attention now. Your message has been scrubbed because of possible contamination by a virus. a highly concentrated state of intoxication, a state which, like madness, frequently enables the victim to imitate the outward demeanor of one in perfect possession of his senses. Poe. It's always darkest at night. A darkness day can't touch. But we learn to live it, or anyway, it learns to live with us. Think snow and see bokeh. Crane is not metrical so much as parametrical. My palsied heart and I agree. It may be impossible, but the concept is that we articulate our judgments, preferences, and beliefs while being aware that these are not universally shared. This holds a special problem for those whose beliefs include a belief in the universality of their beliefs. The cause of the cold is not the cold. We live facing the blinding sun of the not yet born in the shade of the dead. Meaning is the liminal space where the dead live in us as we look toward the future. It is all very confused, but more confused than confusing. Stein, the mother of us all. Shadow, come and take this shadow up. Are we here yet? For now I go hour to hour. If you're not part of the problem, you will be. Before you go, thoughts inanimate, stumbled spare. Before you go, folded memories tinctured with despair. Before you go, two lakes inside a jar. Before you go, flame illumines fitful lie. Before you go, furtive then morrow, never now. Before you go, lacerating gap, stippled rain. Before you go, anger rubs raw and sweet. Before you go, never seen the other side of sleep. Before you go, nothing left for, not yet, grief. Before you go, a slope, a map, insistent heave. Before you go, stone and stem, nocturne, leap. Before you go, compass made of bones and teeth. Before you go, the wind up axe, delirium's beast. Before you go, spilt quell, impatient, speaks. Before you go, rippling laughter, radiance, leaks. Before you go, no place, no sound, nor up or down. Before you go, smoky, swollen seeps. Before you go, tossing in tune just like last night. Before you go, I'm nowhere near the fight. Before you go, nothing to make it right. Before you go, it won't congeal, no more deals. Before you go, hope offense wells on fire. Before you go, slammed when you don't, damned if not. Before you go, a hound, a bay, a hurtled dove. Before you go, coriander and lace, stickly grace. Before you go, englobing trace, fading quakes. Before you go. Devil's grail, face of fate, before you go. Suspended deanimation, recalcitrant fright, before you go. Everything so goddamn slow, before you. Take me now, I'm feeling low, before you. Just let me unhitch this toe, before you. One more stitch still to sew, before. Calculus hidden deep in snow, before. Can't hear, don't stay, before. Lie still, who sings this song? Beth, a token, a throw, a truculent pen. B, don't know much, but that I do. B, 2-lane blacktop, undulating light. Not for all the whiskey in heaven. Not for all the flies in Vermont. Not for all the tears in the basement. Not for a million trips to Mars. Not if you paid me in diamonds. Not if you paid me in pearls. Not if you gave me your pinky ring. Not if you gave me your curls. Not for all the fire in hell. Not for all the blue in the sky. Not for an empire of my own. Not even for peace of mind. No, never. I'll never stop loving you, not till my heart beats its last. And even then, in these words and this song, I will love you all over again.